The American Labor Museum, and I'm going to share with you how to make a steampunk visual art project today, inspired by the Industrial Revolution in Paterson, New Jersey, and specifically the workers in the mills at that time. This is the early 19th century that we are talking about. So steampunk art is very popular these days. Let me tell you a little bit about it. Steampunk is an art movement that is inspired by the Industrial Revolution. Steampunk began in the imaginations of science fiction writers who describe a future where technology never expanded past steam engines and Tesla coils. Steampunk art contains low-tech elements, nuts, bolts, belts, gears, crystal, goggles, valves, and pressure gauges, steam-powered machines, quirky factories, fantasy airships, and brass and mahogany spaceships. There are examples of steampunk visual art projects available to you on the museum's website. Where you click to access this video, in fact, there are 3 worksheets that you can use for this project. And one that you will see, the one that I just read from, has some examples of steampunk art. To inspire our project, we're going to first quickly take a look at some old images of Paterson, New Jersey. Paterson grew along the Passaic River. The river was the source of water power and steam for factories in Paterson. This old print shows what factories looked like in the city. Notice these smokestacks rising above the buildings. And if you look closely in the foreground, there are no modern vehicles. Everybody walked to work. Work life in the Industrial Revolution brought great changes to working families. People no longer worked at home-based industries, but they went to factories where they were paid wages, and their working conditions were set by the owners of the factories. Workers had no voice or say in the workplace, so their workplaces were often very dangerous places to be. They were filled with machinery that they operated, and in this photograph, the worker is at a bench with many chemicals. He's responsible for creating dyes, chemical combinations that put color in silk. Paterson, New Jersey, after all, became known as the Silk City, producing high-grade silk. Most of the workers in the mills during the Industrial Revolution were immigrants. Let's take a look at one. This is a young woman from Italy, and she is operating a machine we call a loom. She is responsible for the machine that makes the actual silk cloth and silk ribbons. Many young people learned their craft in the factories with their parents. 8- and 9-year-olds were at work in the mills. No time for school. Let's take a look at one more picture that shows us all of the machinery in the factory. Look at all the wheels and the belts, the metal machines. Imagine the sounds that were made in the mills. They were very loud and noisy places. The factories were made of brick. The windows were large to allow light. There were dim electric lights hanging in the buildings, but mostly workers relied on natural light. Let's look at a few objects from the mills. This is called a shuttle, and it's used by weavers to create silk. You'll notice it's made of wood with metal tips so it can move quickly on the loom, and in the center is very fine, beautiful silk ready to be woven. The workers would report to work every morning at 6 a.m. So it was important to have a clock in your house, on your wrist, in your pocket, and you watched the clock on the tower of your factory. When it chimed 6 a.m., you started your machine. And if there was a problem with your machine, you called the loom fixer, who might bring a tool like this one to help you. So let's use some of these motifs as inspiration for our steampunk art project. The first thing you'll need is a backing. I like to use the recycle pile at my home where I can find things like a sheet of cardboard from a box. This is a large piece of cardboard. I would cut this down for our project. It will be the backing to which we will glue our final art project. So a piece of cardboard, you will need some glue, and then a piece of paper upon which you could draw a moth, or if you prefer, a butterfly. And both of these images are available by clicking on our website, so you're welcome to use these or create your own. Butterflies and moths are popular motifs in steampunk art. I like to use a moth when I work on this project because it reminds me of the workers in Paterson. When they left for the day, it was dark. Their days were very long in the mills, and they would often see moths fluttering against the windows of their factory as the moths were attracted to the dim lights inside. So draw your moth or use this image that you can print from our website. Take scissors and cut it out carefully, and then take the moth, fold it in half, wing to wing, to create a crease along the center. Along that crease, make a cut. So you're dividing the moth in half. One half of the moth, use your crayons, colors that you like, colors that you see in nature, and create a realistic half of a moth in crayon. With the other half of the moth, use your scissors again to cut out the wings. I've done that already, and I will show the wings to you. Here they are, the two pieces of the moth wing become patterns. And then I'm going to use them to trace on different materials. You may use magazine, newspaper. I pulled out some newspaper from my recycling pile. Workers in the Industrial Revolutions relied on newspapers for their news, so that would be appropriate to use. And I drew around it with a pencil. I'll show you my final project in a moment, and cut out a wing. For the smaller wing, I used some tin foil that my mom no longer needed, was going to throw away, so I made a metal looking bottom part of the moth wing. Once I have the two wings, I wanted to decorate them. So I thought about some other steampunk motifs, and I traced two gears. You can see them here. I also did a rubbing over them to give them some texture, and then I will cut them out. I already cut out two, as you can see. These two gears I traced from a motif sheet that you can find on our website. Here you can see the two gears that I traced. You may download and print this out for yourself from our website, and there are included some other steampunk art motifs. Our clock face from our clock tower. I love skeleton keys, so I included them here, and gears, belts that are also popular in steampunk motifs, and of course some silk bobbins here at the bottom. So let me show you my final project. Once we have these elements, we're ready to glue and assemble. So if you see on my final project, on the left-hand side, I have glued the realistic crayon colored half of my moth, and the other side, the moth half looks almost like a robot, but you can see how I use the steampunk art motifs to create the other half of the moth. And I used a pencil and some marker to draw skeleton key antennas on the moth head, if you will look closely. So I could add more details, more steampunk imagery to my design. This is very basic and a good beginning, but I hope it will inspire you to create your own steampunk visual art project inspired by the story of the Industrial Revolution in Paterson and those working families whose lives changed so dramatically when they went to work in the mills. So have fun making your art project, and thanks for spending your time with me.